Hello everybody and welcome back to Iain the Tech Bear. I'm Iain Bennett and I'm your host for this channel. So today I'm continuing on the Amiga theme with discussing probably what is my most favorite, and it's actually on par with another console that I'll talk about maybe in this video, but an amazing console that came out in 1993. In fact, it was released July 16th in the UK, and you can already see on the screen the Commodore Amiga CD32. This is, at the time, was a beast of a console. It had a Motorola 68EC020 at 14.32 MHz for NTSC, 14.81 MHz for PAL, 2 megabytes Amiga chip RAM, which is shared between the graphics and the custom chipset and memory. It was a little bit bottlenecked because it didn't have that 32-bit fast RAM on the system that programs could use, and then the chip RAM being dedicated to the specialized chips. So the ROM was a custom 1 megabyte Kickstart ROM with CD32 details, so what actually loads the screen here, and also has onboard CD players and CD plus G players. It also had a 1K non-volatile EEPROM for saving game data. It had the AGA chipset, 24-bit color palette, with 16.8 million colors, up to 256 on screen, and that's more in index mode, and then the hold and modify 8 modes up to 262,144. Resolutions from 320 by 200 to 1280 by 400 in NTSC, 320 by 256 to 1280 by 512 interlaced with PAL. So pretty high resolution. Audio-wise, it was 4-channel, 8-bit PCM, so essentially 2 stereo channels. So the 4 channels, 2 on the left, 2 on the right, as typical Amiga sound generation. The operating system was based on Amiga OS 3.1, so you had a Kickstart 3.1, CD-ROM drive, and essentially it was an Amiga 1200 with a CD. The CD32 had full backwards compatibility with the CD-TV, so any games with the CD-TV that you wanted to play, all the educational software would actually play on the CD32. So pretty compatible with Kickstart 1.3 games. If you could get them onto a CD-ROM and burn a CD that had Workbench and such on the actual disc. So if you had, again, CD-TV games that were, essentially CD-TV was an Amiga 500 stuck with a CD-ROM and looking like a hi-fi or a CD player at the time, right? So with it being backwards compatible that way, you could actually play some of the older titles. Although not all older titles actually worked with the 020 and higher CPUs from Motorola, and also sometimes with the AGA chipset. It was the first 32-bit gaming console where Sega said, Sega does what Nintendo don't. To be this good would take Sega ages. The interesting thing about this system was it was only launched in the United Kingdom, Australia, Europe, and Canada. It did not launch in the United States of America. And one of the reasons for that was because of a patent infringement case that happened between Commodore and another company. So had it been able to launch in the United States, this may have been much bigger, way bigger than it was. This machine launched early. At the time, Commodore management was thinking, maybe a little too quick. They were slightly out of touch with the market. They the developers of this machine sort of knew what the market wanted, but in terms of building the actual market, with Commodore launching early to hit the that Christmas rush in 1993, it cannibalized the market from the Amiga 1200, which, you know, Commodore International, especially in the UK, was getting a significant number of profits from the 1200. And in fact, the general manager at the time of the UK operations had said to Commodore International Management, so Mehdi Ali, that, hey, if you launch this early, you're going to cannibalize sales from the 1200. You don't want to do that. And of course, he wasn't listened to. So, but still, it launched, and it was the first. The management team was all like, hey, let's get it out, without really thinking about the fact that it needed some really good launch games. And there were some amazing games for this. For example, Psygnosis's Microcosm, which is one of the few games that took full control of what this game console actually had to offer. But yeah, had they waited just that little bit longer, there would have been more spectacular games than there were on this particular console. Essentially, what came out were a lot of games that were already made for the Amiga 1200 that took full advantage of the AGA chipset and essentially copied to CD-ROM with maybe some extra FMV, some extra music, CD quality music, etc., rather than taking full advantage of the O20 and the AGA architecture and the Akiko chip that was in this. So if you remember, the Amiga has a number of coprocessors, typically Fatter Agnes, Denise, Paula, Gary, in the old chip and the ECS chip. AGA introduced a number of new chips that I've already talked about. This one had a special chip called Akiko that did chunky to planar conversions to help with the porting of games from PC to the Amiga platform. It just made things so much easier. And among other things that particular chip actually does. That's the one item that often gets the most notice, most recognition, but that particular chip actually did a lot more. Now, this particular game console had a bit of a dual personality. A lot of people, in some respects, it was kind of a holdover from the Commodore CD TV, in that, was it a computer or was it a game machine or what was it? Now, this was most definitely more game machine oriented. However, even people like myself, when I first purchased this machine, used it for non-gaming purposes. Let me explain. So I bought my first Amiga CD32 in the United Kingdom. It was a steal at the time. That was 1995, 2 years after the release. These were flooding the used market beautifully. So I went into One Step Beyond in Norwich and picked up one of these. I don't remember how much I paid for it, but it was well worth it. The reason I picked it up was I had an Amiga 3000 at the time that I had traveled to the UK with. I was extremely fortunate that machine was actually given to me. And I decided, hey, why don't I use the serial port that's on this and actually use it as an external CD-ROM? I didn't have a television in the UK. I didn't need a television. I had my multi-sync monitor, but this doesn't connect to multi-sync monitors. It's got composite, it's got S-video, and of course has television, and among other ports on here as well. Well, power. And then on the side, it has 2 joysticks ports and a DIN serial port. And of course, an expansion port for things like a full motion video card, etc. So this machine could actually do full video. Anyway, I digress. I turned it into an external CD-ROM drive because Amiga Format and other magazines in the UK that I was purchasing at the time actually had content on CD-ROMs. So what perfect way to actually access those discs. I have a second one here, which I have modded. So unfortunately, the CD-ROM drive, when I picked this one up, was broken and doesn't read. I suspect it doesn't actually focus anymore. Don't know why. However, I have added a terrible fire. So this is an accelerator card. It adds an old PS2 style keyboard port. It adds a DB23 floppy drive port. And that's pretty much it. So it just all plugs in on a card. Oh, and it also adds extra RAM. So it pretty much maxes out this particular computer. Also on here is, I believe it's a CF card with Workbench and a whole bunch of games and applications and such. So essentially that turns this machine into a full-fledged Amiga 1200. So I can add a 1010 or a 1011 floppy drive, add a keyboard, use a mouse from the regular ports here, add a joystick, or use the CD32 gamepad, and away you go. It's pretty powerful. And there are no issues with, at least that I've noticed, playing games or using software on this particular machine versus an Amiga 1200. It feels like it is fully 100% compatible. I'm sure there might be some games or productivity applications that may fail. I've not stumbled on that. So yeah, that's the CD32. With the AGA chipset, it had low resolution video at 320 by 200 and went all the way up to 1280 by 400 NTSC. And a maximum of 262,144 colors in the ham, so hold and modify 8 mode. Otherwise, 256 colors. Not bad for at the time, although graphics on the PC side of the world were starting to really get up there. So it was quite an interesting time period when this machine came out, because CD-ROMs were starting to become all the rage. So of course, on the game machine side, Sega, with their CD system, and Nintendo wasn't quite there yet with optical media that would come with the GameCube. But other console manufacturers were certainly giving it a try. So Sega also, again, with the Saturn. So Saturn was slowly coming out. Unfortunately, the CD32 was not the cash cow that Commodore was hoping it to be. Again, partially because of, in the United States, they couldn't actually sell the units because of the patent infringement litigation that was going on. Commodore missed the payment that they had to pay regarding that particular case. And, unfortunately, by April 1994, they had completely folded and had gone into receivership. Emulation-wise, I am running on my PC Cloanto's Amiga Forever. It actually comes with the Kickstart 3.1 ROMs, and it actually has a CD32 set up already. So you just double click and it runs. However, Usable Amiga Emulator, or UAE, on the Raspberry Pi with RetroPie works beautifully as well. So you can actually emulate a CD32 on a Raspberry Pi. So I have that set up in my retro console upstairs. Some notable uses in Canada of the CD32. So apparently in the late 1990s, some vehicle registries in Canada actually used CD32 systems for testing people for driver applications. I mean, it was kind of the perfect thing. In those days, just prior, the Amiga was hugely powerful in multimedia applications. So it was the perfect form factor and size, and was so versatile for being able to handle some of those use cases. And Van City Bank had a DirecTV system that used the CD32 in their credit union. So featuring a modem, yeah, quite an interesting use. Again, multimedia use of the Amiga. You know, given Commodore had come out with Amiga Vision, which was their multimedia authoring platform, which allowed for presentations and allowed for input and stuff. And logic. It was very flow based. I used it extensively for some of the presentations I did in high school. It was an amazing platform, an amazing system. So why not leverage the CD32 for some of those applications? Most notable international uses was that the London Transport Museum in Covent Garden in London actually used CD32s for their kiosks, the information kiosks and stuff like that. There was a company that created slot machine games and used the CD32 for those. Sylvan Learning Systems apparently in their Wall Street learning centers use these units as well. So again, that whole multimedia thing, and it was the perfect platform for that. PCs were still expensive in those days, and while they were starting to really ramp up with better graphics just in general, they still didn't quite have the price point that something like this would actually have had at the time.